There is a change taking place in your life right now, whether you feel it or not. Something deep, something invisible, something powerful is happening within you. You may look the same on the outside, walk the same roads, face the same challenges, but inside, God is doing a new work. And when that work is complete, even you will pause and say, "Is this really me?" Many people think transformation happens suddenly, but the truth is, it begins quietly. Before the world sees it, before your family recognizes it, before your enemies fear it, the change begins in the spirit. God never reveals the finished picture first. He starts with a vision, a whisper, a promise planted in your heart, and that promise begins to reshape how you see yourself. You may still be surrounded by limitations, but your thinking is changing. You may still be facing resistance, but your faith is growing stronger. What once discouraged you no longer controls you. What once intimidated you now feels smaller. This is not accidental. This is preparation. There was a version of you that could survive, but now God is forming a version of you that can lead, influence, and carry responsibility. The old mindset could not contain the new blessing. The old identity could not sustain the new calling. So God is gently, patiently, powerfully upgrading you from the inside out. Do not be surprised if people begin to misunderstand you. Do not be shaken if familiar places start to feel uncomfortable. That is not rejection, it is transition. You are outgrowing what once defined you. Heaven is expanding your capacity. Soon you will speak with a new authority. You will walk with a new confidence, not arrogance, but assurance. You will respond differently to pressure, to criticism, to delay. And one day, you will look back at who you used to be and realize you don't even recognize that person anymore. This is not self-improvement. This is divine transformation. And what God is about to reveal through your life will shock you more than anyone else. There is a sacred truth many people overlook. Transformation does not begin when results appear. It begins the moment God decides to move. Long before circumstances shift, before doors open, before strength is felt, heaven has already initiated the process. What you are experiencing right now may look ordinary, repetitive, even stagnant. But in the spiritual realm, motion has already started. God never announces transformation with noise. He begins it with alignment. While you wait, while you wonder, while you pray the same prayer again and again, divine activity is already at work, shaping outcomes you cannot yet see. Most people assume nothing is happening because nothing feels dramatic. But divine transformation is rarely loud at the beginning. It starts like a seed beneath the soil, unseen and uncelebrated, yet full of life. The ground looks unchanged, but beneath it roots are forming, strength is developing, direction is being set. If you dig the seed up too early because you doubt the process, you interrupt what was already working. This is why faith is required before evidence appears. God does not ask you to believe in what you can already see. He asks you to trust what He has already started. There are seasons when God works externally, changing situations and environments. And there are seasons when He works internally, changing perception, endurance, and spiritual capacity. When transformation is in motion, God often focuses first on the inner life, because what you carry inside determines what you can handle outside. You may be praying for a change in circumstances, but God may be answering by changing you, strengthening your patience, deepening your discernment, expanding your faith. This is not delay, this is design. Many people quit too early because they misunderstand silence. They think God has stopped moving because they cannot hear Him, but silence often means concentration. When an artist is deeply focused, the room becomes quiet. When a builder is laying a foundation, there is more digging than decorating. God does not speak loudly while he is laying foundations in the soul. He works deeply. And deep work takes time. Transformation already in motion does not always feel positive. Sometimes it feels like discomfort, restlessness, dissatisfaction with what once felt acceptable. You may begin to feel unsettled in places where you once felt comfortable. Old habits may no longer satisfy you. Conversations that once energized you may now feel empty. This is not confusion. This is evidence of change. When God begins to move, he changes your appetite before he changes your assignment. You start craving growth, meaning, depth, purpose. The familiar starts to feel small because you are being prepared for something larger. It is important to understand that divine transformation is intentional, not accidental. God does not randomly upgrade lives. Every change he initiates is connected to purpose. If pressure has increased, it is because capacity is being expanded. If responsibility feels heavier, it is because strength is being developed. If the journey feels longer than expected, it is because precision matters. God is not only interested in where you arrive, he is deeply concerned with who you become on the way. Often, the clearest sign that transformation is in motion is resistance. Opposition tends to increase when progress has already been approved in the spiritual realm. The enemy does not fight what is going nowhere. Struggle is not proof of failure. It is often confirmation that movement has begun. When God opens a new chapter, resistance tries to delay confidence, weaken faith, and distort perspective. But resistance cannot cancel what God has initiated. It can only test your willingness to trust the process. There are moments when transformation feels invisible even to you. You may question whether you are growing at all. Yet growth is not always measured by emotion. A child grows while sleeping. Muscles develop while resting after strain. In the same way, spiritual growth often happens quietly through obedience, consistency, and perseverance. You show up, you pray, you endure. You keep believing. And while nothing seems to change overnight, everything is changing over time. Divine transformation in motion also explains why shortcuts are removed. God will not rush what requires maturity. He knows that arriving too early can be more dangerous than arriving late. A blessing received before character is formed becomes a burden instead of a gift. So God allows the process to take its full course. Not to punish you, but to protect you. Not to withhold, but to prepare. What makes this transformation powerful is that it is not dependent on your awareness. Even when you feel weak, even when your faith feels small, even when your prayers feel imperfect, God continues working. His faithfulness does not fluctuate with your emotions. His plans are not fragile. What he begins, he sustains. What he initiates, he completes. One day, the outward evidence will catch up with the inward work. Clarity will replace confusion. Strength will replace struggle. Confidence will replace hesitation. And when that moment arrives, it will seem sudden to others, but you will know it was gradual, intentional, and divinely orchestrated. The change will not feel foreign, it will feel fulfilled. You will recognize it not as something new, but as something that was forming all along, patiently, quietly, faithfully. There is a profound mistake many people make when they look at their lives. They assume that who they are today is who they will always be. They define themselves by current limitations, present struggles, and visible weaknesses. But your present condition is not a conclusion. It is a snapshot taken in the middle of a journey. The version of you that exists right now is temporary, shaped by where you are, not by where you are going. God never measures a life by its current chapter, but by the purpose He has already written into it. From the very beginning, God works with potential, not appearances. He sees what is hidden beneath insecurity, fear, and inconsistency. While people label you by your past or evaluate you by your present performance, God defines you by what He placed inside you before circumstances ever touched you. This is why your current self often feels out of alignment with the dreams stirring in your heart. That tension is not frustration. It is evidence that you are more than what you see in the mirror today. Many people struggle because they try to become better versions of their old selves instead of allowing God to form an entirely new identity within them. Improvement focuses on behavior, but transformation reshapes identity. God is not interested in polishing the old nature. He is committed to revealing the new one. The person you are becoming will not simply act differently, but think differently, respond differently, and believe differently. Old reactions will lose their power, and old fears will lose their authority. Your present self has limitations for a reason. It was never designed to carry the future God has prepared for you. The weight of your calling requires strength you do not yet possess, wisdom you have not yet developed, and faith that has not yet matured. This is why the journey includes seasons of growth that feel uncomfortable. God allows you to confront your weaknesses, not to shame you, but to outgrow them. What you acknowledge, God can transform. Often, the greatest resistance to becoming new comes from familiarity. The current version of you may be flawed, but it is predictable. Change requires surrender, and surrender requires trust. Letting go of who you have been can feel like losing control, even when who you have been is limiting your future. But God never removes an identity without replacing it with something stronger. He does not strip you, He rebuilds you. Your present self is shaped by past experiences, successes, failures, and environments. But your future self is shaped by purpose. Purpose is not reactive, it is intentional. It pulls you forward, even when your emotions pull you backward. This is why you may feel drawn toward growth that scares you. Something within you recognizes that stagnation is more dangerous than change. Remaining the same feels safer, but it slowly suffocates the potential God placed inside you. There are moments when you will not recognize yourself in your own progress. The things that once triggered you no longer have the same effect. The approval you once chased no longer controls your decisions. The fear that once silenced you begins to lose its voice. These are not small shifts, they are signs of identity transition. You are becoming someone who operates from conviction rather than convenience, from faith rather than fear. It is important to understand that becoming new does not mean erasing your story. God does not waste pain, delay, or struggle. Every experience is repurposed, every lesson integrated, every wound redeemed. The future version of you carries the wisdom of the past without being imprisoned by it. What once hurt you becomes what strengthens you. What once limited you becomes what qualifies you to help others. Many people become discouraged because they judge themselves too early. They criticize their current pace, compare their process, and condemn their imperfections. But growth is not linear, and transformation is not instant. God allows progress to unfold layer by layer, because depth cannot be rushed. What appears slow is often stable. What appears delayed is often being refined. You may not yet have the confidence you desire, the clarity you seek, or the courage you admire in others. But that does not mean you are failing. It means you are forming. The seed does not look like the tree, but it already contains it. In the same way, your present self may look small compared to the vision God has given you, but the essence of who you will become is already inside you. As you continue to walk with God, your identity will align with your calling. Your habits will follow your beliefs. Your actions will reflect your values. The gap between who you are and who you are becoming will begin to close. And one day, you will look back at this version of yourself with gratitude, not regret, recognizing that it was necessary, temporary, and part of a much greater unfolding, a reminder that you were never meant to stay who you were when the journey began. God has a divine pattern that He follows in every great transformation. He reveals before He manifests. Long before a door opens, a vision appears. Long before a promise becomes visible, it is planted internally. God does not begin with circumstances, He begins with perception. He allows you to see what does not yet exist so that your faith can begin building a bridge between the invisible and the visible. This is why people often receive a sense of calling, purpose, or destiny long before they have the capacity, resources, or position to fulfill it. Vision always comes before reality because faith must be formed before fulfillment can occur. If God were to release the future without preparing the mind, the soul, and the character, the blessing would overwhelm the person instead of elevating them. So He reveals in advance. He allows you to glimpse what is coming while you are still in the place of becoming. This is not to tease you, but to train you. Vision is not information, it is preparation. When God reveals the future, He rarely gives details. He gives direction. He gives impressions, convictions, inner clarity, and spiritual awareness. You may not know how it will happen, when it will happen, or through whom it will happen, but you know something is coming. That knowing becomes the anchor of your faith. It sustains you when the journey feels long and the progress feels slow. Vision becomes the fuel that keeps obedience alive. This is why people often feel out of place in their current season. Their environment no longer matches their internal vision. Their surroundings do not reflect their future identity. Their present position feels too small for the dreams growing inside them. This disconnect creates discomfort, but it also creates momentum. Vision makes stagnation unbearable. It creates a holy dissatisfaction that pushes you forward. God reveals the future, not to make you impatient, but to make you persistent. Without vision, people settle. They adapt to limitation. They normalize mediocrity. But when vision is present, compromise becomes uncomfortable. You can endure hardship, but you cannot accept hopelessness. You can survive difficulty, but you cannot live without direction. Vision gives suffering meaning and struggle purpose. Many people think vision is imagination, but spiritual vision is revelation. It is not fantasy, it is alignment. It is God allowing you to see yourself through His perspective instead of your circumstances. This is why vision often contradicts reality. Reality says you are limited. Vision says you are chosen. Reality says you are behind. Vision says you are being prepared. Reality says you are unqualified. Vision says you are becoming. God reveals the future in the mind before He reveals it in life. Your thinking must expand before your life can expand. Your belief system must grow before your capacity can grow. Your identity must shift before your position can shift. If the mind is not renewed, the life cannot be transformed. Vision is the mechanism God uses to begin that renewal. There are times when vision feels painful because it highlights the gap between where you are and where you are going. It shows you what you are not yet. It exposes what still needs to change. But that pain is not condemnation, it is calibration. God is aligning you with your future, not shaming you for your present. The discomfort is not rejection, it is refinement. Vision also protects you from distraction. When you know where you are going, you stop chasing what does not belong to you. You stop settling for relationships, opportunities, and paths that do not align with your purpose. Vision sharpens discernment. It teaches you to say no without guilt and yes without fear. It simplifies decisions because direction becomes clearer. Sometimes God reveals the future in pieces, not as a full picture. You see one step, one door, one instruction at a time. This is intentional. If you saw the full journey, you might run ahead of your development. If you saw the full weight of the assignment, you might retreat in fear. So God gives enough vision to move you forward, but not so much that it overwhelms you. Vision also builds resilience. When trials come, vision keeps you standing. When progress slows, vision keeps you believing. When people doubt you, vision keeps you grounded. You may not have evidence, but you have conviction. You may not have confirmation, but you have clarity. Vision becomes your internal compass when external direction is unclear. One of the greatest dangers is ignoring vision. When people suppress what God has revealed, they shrink their future. They choose comfort over calling, safety over purpose, familiarity over destiny. Vision ignored becomes frustration. Vision delayed becomes discouragement. Vision embraced becomes transformation. God never reveals the future to entertain the mind. He reveals it to shape the life. He shows you who you will become, so you can begin becoming it now. He allows you to see your future identity, so you can start shedding your old one. He introduces the destination so the journey makes sense. This is why vision often comes during quiet moments, prayer, reflection, and stillness. It is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's a deep inner knowing, a strong conviction, a clear sense of direction, a peaceful certainty that this is not the end of your story, that knowing is not emotion, it is revelation. As you grow, your vision grows. What once seemed impossible begins to feel inevitable. What once felt distant begins to feel close. Your confidence does not come from your ability, but from your alignment. You know that if God revealed it, He will fulfill it. If He showed it, He will shape you for it. If He promised it, He will prepare you for it. The future God reveals is not always about position or success. Sometimes it is about character, peace, stability, wisdom, and spiritual authority. Sometimes the greatest future is not what you have, but who you become. A person who is whole, a person who is free, a person who is grounded, a person who is unshakable. What God reveals in advance becomes the blueprint for transformation. Vision directs growth. Purpose shapes development. Destiny guides discipline. You do not grow randomly, you grow intentionally when vision is present. Even now, if you feel a quiet sense that your life is moving somewhere greater, deeper and higher, that is not imagination. That is revelation. God is showing you the future before it appears, not to pressure you, but to prepare you, not to rush you, but to ready you, not to confuse you, but to align you with what is already forming in the unseen realm and steadily moving toward manifestation in the visible world. Every lasting change in life follows a divine order. What happens inside always comes before what appears outside. People often focus on visible results, external success, and public breakthroughs, but God works in reverse. He begins in the hidden places of the heart, the mind, and the spirit, because outward change without inward transformation never lasts. When inner change is absent, external progress becomes fragile, unstable, and easily lost. This is why God prioritizes who you are becoming over what you are achieving. Inner change is subtle, quiet, and often misunderstood. It does not announce itself with applause or recognition. It happens in moments of reflection, conviction, prayer, struggle, and surrender. It happens when your perspective shifts, when your values realign, when your reactions change. You may not feel powerful during this process, but you are becoming powerful in the deepest way. Strength is being formed beneath the surface long before it is displayed in public. Many people ask God to change their situation, but God first changes their interpretation of the situation. He adjusts how you see pressure, delay, rejection, and responsibility. When your perception changes, your response changes. And when your response changes, your outcomes begin to shift naturally. External transformation is often the byproduct of internal realignment, not the result of force or striving. Inner change involves renewing the mind. The way you think determines the way you live. Old thinking patterns produce repeated cycles of limitation, even when opportunities increase. This is why some people move to new environments but experience the same problems. Without inner change, location cannot produce elevation. God reshapes thinking so that when external doors open, you are mentally prepared to walk through them with wisdom and stability. One of the clearest signs that inner change is happening is emotional maturity. Situations that once triggered anger, fear, or insecurity begin to lose their power. You still feel pressure, but it no longer controls you. You still face opposition, but it no longer defines you. Emotional responses shift before external conditions do. This is not suppression, it is transformation. You are no longer reacting from wounds, but responding from strength. God also works on motives before outcomes. He refines why you want what you want. Without pure motives, success becomes destructive. Power without humility leads to pride. Influence without integrity leads to compromise. Provision without purpose leads to emptiness. Inner change aligns desire with purpose, so that when blessings come, they do not corrupt, but complete. Inner change often feels like loss before it feels like gain. Old habits fade. Old desires weaken. Old attachments loosen. What once excited you may no longer satisfy you. This can feel like confusion or emptiness, but it is actually clearing. God is making room. Before He fills your life with new things, He empties what no longer fits. You cannot carry new wine in old containers. Inner change replaces the container. There are seasons when nothing changes externally, yet everything is changing internally. This can be frustrating for those who measure progress only by visible results. But God values depth over speed. A shallow breakthrough collapses under pressure, but a deep transformation stands firm over time. God is not impressed by quick success. He is committed to sustainable growth. Inner change also strengthens discernment. As your spirit becomes more aligned with God, your ability to recognize what belongs in your life sharpens. You begin to sense when something is right or wrong, even when it looks good on the surface. This protects you from costly mistakes and misaligned opportunities. Discernment is a result of inner clarity, not external information. Character development is a major part of inner change. God forms patience, humility, courage, and resilience long before He grants authority. Authority without character becomes abuse. Leadership without love becomes control. Visibility without maturity becomes exposure. Inner change ensures that when your life expands, your character can support the weight of expansion. Faith itself is an inner transformation. Trusting God in uncertainty reshapes the heart. Depending on Him in weakness builds spiritual strength. Obedience in small things forms consistency. These internal decisions accumulate over time, shaping a person who can stand firm when greater tests come. God does not rush the process. He knows exactly what must be developed before release occurs. What feels like delay is often alignment. What feels like stagnation is often preparation. When inner change reaches completion, outer change follows naturally, sometimes suddenly. This is why breakthroughs often appear unexpected to others. They did not see the years of inner work, the silent battles, the private growth, the unseen obedience. They only see the result. But nothing is sudden in the kingdom of God. What appears overnight has been forming quietly over time. Inner change also reshapes identity. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and begin seeing yourself as a steward of purpose. You stop defining yourself by failure and start defining yourself by growth. Identity shift is the foundation of lasting transformation. When you see yourself differently, you live differently. When God completes inner change, outer change becomes inevitable. Relationships shift, doors open, favor appears. But these external changes are no longer the source of your confidence or peace. They become expressions of what is already established within you. The greatest danger is pursuing outer change without inner change. It creates stress, fear, and instability. But when inner change leads, outer change follows with ease, order, and sustainability. You are no longer chasing results. You are living from alignment. What God is doing inside you right now matters more than what you see around you. The quiet work, the unseen adjustments, the internal growth are shaping a future that will stand firm under pressure. When the outward transformation arrives, it will not overwhelm you because the inward transformation has already prepared you to carry it with wisdom, peace, and strength that cannot be shaken. The way you see yourself quietly governs the direction of your life. Long before actions change, self-image changes. Faith does not begin with what you do. It begins with what you believe about who you are. When faith is formed, it reshapes identity from the inside, and that new identity begins to influence choices, endurance, courage, and consistency. People often try to change behavior without addressing self-image, but behavior always returns to the level of belief. You do not rise permanently above how you see yourself. Faith creates a new self-image by aligning your inner perception with God's perspective rather than your past experiences. Many people see themselves through the lens of failure, rejection, limitation, or comparison. These experiences may be real, but they are not authoritative. Faith introduces a higher reference point. It teaches you to see yourself not as history has shaped you, but as purpose defines you. When that shift occurs, the inner dialogue changes, and with it, the direction of life. Self-image is not confidence in ability, it is confidence in identity. Faith does not say, I can do everything. Faith says, I am becoming who I was created to be. This distinction matters because confidence rooted in ability collapses under pressure, but confidence rooted in identity remains steady. When you know who you are, circumstances cannot easily shake you. You may struggle, but you do not lose direction. You may fall, but you do not lose worth. God often changes self-image before he changes circumstances because perception determines readiness. If your self-image is small, blessings feel threatening instead of empowering. Opportunity feels intimidating instead of exciting. Responsibility feels heavy instead of honorable. Faith expands self-image so that when growth comes, you do not retreat into insecurity. You begin to see yourself as capable of learning, growing, leading, and carrying more. Faith reshapes the way you interpret setbacks. When self-image is weak, failure feels personal and final. When self-image is formed by faith, failure becomes instructional, not defining. You no longer see mistakes as proof that you are unqualified, but as part of refinement. This shift keeps you moving forward instead of retreating into shame. Shame freezes growth, but faith restores momentum. A renewed self-image also changes how you respond to others. You stop seeking validation where you already have identity. Approval becomes optional rather than necessary. Criticism becomes information rather than intimidation. Praise becomes encouragement rather than addiction. Faith stabilizes the inner world so the outer world no longer controls emotional balance. This is not pride, it is grounding. One of the most powerful effects of faith-based self-image is consistency. People with fragile self-image are inconsistent because their motivation fluctuates with emotion and feedback. People with a faith-formed self-image show up even when they do not feel affirmed. They persist even when progress is slow. They remain disciplined even when recognition is absent. Consistency is not willpower, it is identity in motion. Faith also redefines worth. Instead of measuring value by productivity, success, or comparison, worth becomes intrinsic. You no longer need to prove yourself to deserve growth. You grow because growth aligns with who you are becoming. This frees you from unhealthy striving. Effort becomes focused, not frantic. Ambition becomes purposeful, not desperate. As self-image changes, language changes. The way you speak about yourself, your future, and your challenges begins to shift. Words carry identity. When faith reshapes self-image, negative self-talk loses authority. You no longer speak defeat over your life casually. You become aware that words reinforce perception, and perception reinforces direction. Faith does not deny difficulty, but it refuses to agree with limitation. A new self-image also affects boundaries. You begin to protect what aligns with your purpose and release what drains it. You say no with clarity and yes with conviction. This is not selfishness, it is stewardship. When you value who you are becoming, you become selective about what you allow to shape you. Faith teaches you that not everything available is appropriate. Many people wait for external success to feel different about themselves, but faith reverses the order. You begin seeing yourself differently before circumstances validate it. This feels uncomfortable at first because it requires living ahead of evidence. But every major transformation requires internal agreement before external confirmation. You must see yourself becoming before you can sustain becoming. Faith, formed self-image, does not erase humility, it deepens it. True humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking accurately about yourself. You recognize your dependence on God, while also recognizing the value He placed within you. This balance keeps you teachable without being insecure, confident without being arrogant, strong without being rigid. As self-image changes, courage follows. You take steps you once avoided. You attempt things that once intimidated you. Not because fear disappears, but because identity becomes stronger than fear. Faith does not remove risk, it redefines it. Staying the same becomes riskier than growing. Silence becomes riskier than obedience. Comfort becomes riskier than calling. Faith also heals distorted self-images formed by trauma and rejection. Experiences that once defined you lose their power to name you. You stop living as a reaction to pain and begin living from purpose. Healing is not forgetting the past, it is refusing to let the past dictate identity. Faith reframes memory so it no longer controls direction. When self-image aligns with faith, discipline becomes natural. You care for your body, mind, and spirit, not out of pressure, but out of respect. You invest in growth, not to prove value, but to express it. You treat yourself as someone worth developing. This mindset sustains long-term growth far better than motivation ever could. Eventually, others begin to notice the change. Not because you announce it, but because you carry yourself differently. Your presence becomes calmer. Your decisions become clearer. Your reactions become measured. This is not performance, it is alignment. You are living from the inside out. Faith does not instantly change everything, but it steadily changes the most important thing, how you see yourself. And once that foundation shifts, everything built upon it begins to change as well, because you no longer live trying to become someone else. You live unfolding into who you were always meant to be. Delay is one of the most misunderstood experiences in the journey of faith. When things do not happen according to expectation, the human mind quickly interprets waiting as rejection. But in the divine order, delay is rarely denial. It is often evidence that something valuable is being prepared with precision. God does not operate on haste, He operates on timing. And timing is not about speed, but about readiness. What feels slow to you may be perfectly aligned with what must be formed within you and around you. Denial shuts doors permanently, but delay keeps doors protected until the moment is right. If God intended to deny you, He would remove the desire, silence the vision, and close the path completely. But when desire remains alive, vision remains clear, and direction remains steady, waiting is not rejection. It is an invitation to trust deeper. Delay does not mean God has forgotten. It often means He is carefully coordinating details you cannot yet see. Many people grow discouraged during delay because they focus on outcomes instead of preparation. They want arrival without development, results without refinement. But God is deeply invested in sustainability. He knows that receiving something too early can destroy what was meant to bless you. Delay becomes a form of mercy. It prevents premature exposure, protects you from unnecessary damage, and allows maturity to catch up with opportunity. Delay also exposes motives. When things take longer than expected, the heart is revealed. Are you pursuing the promise for purpose or for validation? Are you faithful only when progress is visible? Are you committed to obedience or only to outcomes? Waiting has a way of purifying intention. What remains after disappointment is filtered, is what is truly rooted in faith. In seasons of delay, God often works on alignment. There are people who must be positioned, relationships that must be adjusted, skills that must be developed, and perspectives that must be reshaped. You may be ready in one area, but unprepared in another. God does not partially prepare blessings. He ensures that all supporting structures are in place so that when the promise arrives, it stands firm. Delay also strengthens endurance. Faith that is never tested remains fragile. Trust that is never stretched remains shallow. Waiting teaches patience, but more importantly, it teaches perseverance. You learn to remain steady without constant reassurance. You learn to obey without immediate reward. This kind of faith produces inner strength that cannot be shaken by future uncertainty. There is also a difference between God delaying and God developing. While you are waiting for an answer, God may be answering through growth. While you are waiting for change, God may be changing your capacity. While you are waiting for clarity, God may be training discernment. Delay does not mean inactivity. Heaven is never idle. What appears still on the surface is often moving deeply underneath. Delay refines expectation. Early expectations are often shaped by emotion and imagination. As time passes, Expectations become more grounded, realistic, and aligned with purpose. What you once wanted may evolve into something deeper and more meaningful. Delay matures desire so that when fulfillment comes, it satisfies rather than overwhelms. One of the greatest dangers during delay is comparison. Watching others receive what you are waiting for can create bitterness, doubt, and impatience. But comparison ignores context. Each journey has its own timing, challenges, and requirements. What arrives early for one person may arrive at the wrong time for another. God customizes timing because He customizes purpose. Delay also builds trust beyond understanding. When answers are immediate, faith relies on evidence. When answers are delayed, faith relies on relationship. You learn to trust God for who He is, not just for what He gives. This level of trust produces peace, even in uncertainty. You stop needing constant signs because your confidence rests in His character. Sometimes delay is necessary because the future version of you has not fully emerged yet. The current version may desire the blessing, but the future version is the one equipped to manage it. God is not denying you. He is protecting your future self. He sees consequences you cannot see, pressures you have not yet faced, and responsibilities you have not yet carried. Delay can also be a season of instruction. God teaches through stillness as much as through movement. You learn to listen more carefully. You become more sensitive to guidance. You develop wisdom that cannot be learned in motion alone. Noise often decreases during waiting, so clarity can increase. When delay is embraced rather than resisted, it becomes productive. You stop fighting time and start using it. You invest in growth, deepen discipline, strengthen faith, and refine vision. Delay stops being an obstacle and starts becoming an asset. It becomes part of the preparation, not a pause in progress. There are moments when delay feels painful because hope has been stretched thin. But stretched hope is stronger hope. Hope that has endured disappointment carries depth. It is no longer naive, but resilient. This kind of hope does not collapse when challenged. It stands firm because it has already survived waiting. God never delays out of neglect. He delays out of wisdom. He sees the full picture, the long-term impact, and the unseen variables. What you experience as postponement may be protection from harm, misalignment, or premature exposure. What feels like slowness may be accuracy. When the moment finally arrives, delay will make sense. You will recognize that the timing was not late, but exact. You will see how the waiting shaped you, strengthened you, and prepared you. The fulfillment will not feel fragile or overwhelming. It will feel stable, earned through patience, and sustained through maturity. Delay does not cancel promises. It confirms their value. If something were insignificant, it would not require preparation. If something were temporary, it would not require refinement. Delay is often the signal that what is coming carries weight. Even now, if you feel like you are waiting longer than expected, remember that waiting is not wasting. Time is not being lost. Progress is not being reversed. God is still working, still aligning, still shaping. Delay is not denial, it is development, protection, and preparation working together in perfect timing. There comes a moment in every life when what once worked can no longer carry what is coming next. Growth exposes mismatch. Expansion reveals limitation. A new assignment demands a new capacity, and the old version of you, no matter how familiar or comfortable, cannot sustain the weight of what God is preparing to release. This is not an insult to who you were. It is an invitation to who you must become. God does not discard people, but He does require evolution. The old you was built for survival, learning, endurance, and basic faith. The new assignment requires leadership, stewardship, authority, and depth. Survival mentality cannot manage responsibility. Coping skills cannot sustain calling. God never promotes without preparing, and preparation often begins by confronting the limits of your current identity. What brought you this far is not enough to take you further. This is why transition often feels uncomfortable. You sense that something is shifting, but you cannot yet define it. Old habits feel restrictive. Old thinking feels inadequate. Old reactions feel out of place. This discomfort is not confusion, it is evidence that you are outgrowing a former version of yourself. Growth always creates tension between who you have been and who you are becoming. Many people resist this stage because the old self is predictable. It knows how to navigate familiar struggles. It knows how to manage known limitations. Letting go of it feels risky, even when it is limiting your future. But God never calls you forward without giving grace to become who the assignment requires. He does not ask you to perform beyond capacity. He expands capacity before expectation. The old you may have relied on emotion, but the new assignment requires discipline. The old you may have avoided confrontation, but the new assignment requires courage. The old you may have depended on approval, but the new assignment requires conviction. These shifts do not happen overnight. They are formed through pressure, responsibility, obedience, and time. God often allows situations that expose the inadequacy of the old self, not to humiliate you, but to awaken you. When you feel overwhelmed by responsibilities you once prayed for, it is a sign that growth is necessary. When your usual methods stop working, it is a signal that God is inviting you to develop new ones. Frustration becomes a teacher when you listen instead of resist. The old you was shaped by past environments, limitations, and wounds. The new assignment requires healing, clarity, and authority. Ones that were once manageable become liabilities at higher levels of influence. God does not elevate unresolved pain. He heals it. This is why inner work becomes non-negotiable during seasons of preparation. What you ignore in private will surface in public. Shedding the old self does not mean rejecting your history. It means refusing to let history dictate your future. Lessons remain. Wisdom remains, but limiting identities must go. You are no longer defined by what hurt you, what failed, or what delayed you. You are defined by what you are becoming. God honors the past, but He does not allow it to control destiny. One of the clearest signs that the old you cannot carry the new assignment is increased responsibility. Responsibility exposes gaps in character, patience, leadership, and faith. It reveals whether you react or respond, avoid or engage, complain or grow. God uses responsibility as a mirror. What you see is not condemnation, it is instruction. The old you may have depended heavily on external validation, but the new assignment requires internal assurance. When visibility increases, criticism increases. When influence grows, scrutiny grows. Without a secure identity, expansion becomes overwhelming. God strengthens inner stability so outer pressure does not collapse you. Confidence rooted in calling, not applause, becomes essential. Another sign of transition is the loss of tolerance for what once felt acceptable. You may find yourself unwilling to compromise values you once negotiated. You become more intentional with time, energy, and relationships. This is not arrogance, it is alignment. The new assignment requires focus. Distractions that once seemed harmless now feel costly. God also removes certain relationships during this phase. Not because people are bad, but because alignment has changed. The old you needed certain voices, the new you needs different ones. Growth demands new counsel, new accountability, new environments. Holding on to old connections out of loyalty can delay destiny if those connections no longer support who you are becoming. Letting go of the old self requires humility. You must admit that growth is needed. You must accept instruction. You must remain teachable. Pride clings to familiarity. Humility embraces transformation. God gives grace to the humble because humility makes room for expansion. The old you may have been reactive, but the new assignment requires discernment. Quick reactions create damage at higher levels. Discernment requires patience, listening, and wisdom. God slows you down so you can lead well. Speed without discernment becomes recklessness when influence increases. This process often feels lonely. Few people understand the internal shift you are experiencing. You are no longer who you were, but not yet fully who you will be. This in-between space can feel isolating, but it is sacred. God often does his deepest work in private before he trusts public responsibility. The danger is trying to carry the new assignment with the old self. That creates exhaustion, stress, and inconsistency. You feel called, but depleted. You feel chosen, but unprepared. This tension is not failure, it is feedback. God is inviting you to grow into the assignment instead of forcing the assignment to fit who you used to be. As you allow God to reshape you, strength replaces strain, clarity replaces confusion, confidence replaces insecurity. The new self begins to emerge naturally, not through striving, but through alignment. You do not become someone else. You become more fully who you were designed to be. The old you was necessary for the journey so far. It taught you lessons, built resilience, and carried you through seasons of formation, but it cannot carry the future God is unfolding. Releasing it is not loss, it is obedience. What feels like surrender is actually transition. What feels like ending is preparation. When the new assignment finally manifests fully, it will not overwhelm you because you will no longer be trying to carry it as the old you. You will have the capacity, maturity, and authority required. You will recognize that the hardest part was not waiting for the assignment, but becoming the person capable of carrying it. Understanding that growth was never optional. It was required for what God always intended to entrust to you. Spiritual growth rarely feels comfortable because expansion always stretches what already exists. When God begins to upgrade a life, he does not gently add something on top of what is already there. He enlarges the capacity from within. That enlargement creates pressure. Just as muscles grow through resistance and strain, the soul grows through seasons that feel heavy, confusing, and demanding. Discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is often the clearest evidence that something is changing. Many people assume that God's favor will feel easy, peaceful, and smooth at every stage, but that assumption misunderstands the nature of growth. Peace is not the absence of pressure, it is stability within it. When God expands you, he allows circumstances that challenge your current limits. He stretches patience, deepens faith, refines character, and strengthens endurance. These internal upgrades rarely feel pleasant while they are happening, but they produce lasting strength once complete. Discomfort often appears when old frameworks no longer fit new realities. What once supported you begins to feel restrictive. Old habits, routines, and coping mechanisms lose effectiveness. This can feel destabilizing, as if the ground beneath you is shifting. In truth, it is. God is removing what can no longer support where you are going. He does not tear down without intention. He dismantles in order to rebuild with greater capacity. Spiritual upgrades frequently involve tension between the familiar and the unknown. The familiar feels safe, even when it is limiting. The unknown feels threatening, even when it is necessary. Growth requires crossing that threshold. Discomfort signals that you are stepping beyond what you have already mastered. Comfort means repetition. Discomfort means development.